They called her Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who ruled without a king. But under the powdered face, behind the silk curtains of the Tudor court, festered a body racked with rot, vermin, and decay. This is the story they never wanted you to smell. 1. The lead-poisoned mask. Beneath the bright white facade of her face was a creeping death. Elizabeth first wore Venetian carouse, a cosmetic made of white lead, vinegar, and arsenic. She applied it daily to conceal the ravages of smallpox scars and aging. But this toxic concoction didn't just sit on the skin. It seeped in. It ate away at her flesh, layer by layer, turning her complexion into a battlefield of scabs and sores. Still, she applied more. The queen could never be seen vulnerable. To stop applying it would expose the truth. That even monarchs rot. Eventually, doctors suspected her chronic fatigue, memory loss, and nausea weren't just age, but lead poisoning. Elizabeth didn't rule forever, but the paint she wore ruled her to death. 2. The queen who hated baths. Elizabeth bathed once a month, at most. In her words, whether I need it or not. Water was feared in Tudor England. They believed washing opened the pores to disease. So instead of bathing, Elizabeth would layer perfumes, rose oils, and lavender sachets under her clothing to mask her scent. But it didn't work. Royal attendants described a mix of musk, mildew, and decay. She wore gowns that weren't cleaned, just beaten with sticks. Her body would sweat into them over and over. Bacteria bred between her skin and the cloth. When a gown was passed down, it came with its own stench of sovereign sweat. 3. Rotten teeth, royal smiles. Elizabeth had a ravenous craving for sugar, introduced to England during her reign. She chewed on candied violets and sweetened nuts constantly. By middle age, her teeth were black, cracked, and missing. The stench of her breath was legendary, but in a twisted display of loyalty, her courtiers began painting their teeth black to mimic her. Rot became royalty. Ambassadors from Spain and France struggled to understand her speech. Her tongue pressed against empty sockets, muffled by pain. She refused dental work unless the pain was unbearable. When that moment came, her teeth were yanked without anesthesia. She screamed. The court turned away. And then, the queen smiled. 4. The wig of worms. Smallpox had not only scarred Elizabeth's skin, it stole her hair. By age 30, her hairline had receded halfway up her skull. She wore elaborate wigs to maintain the illusion of eternal youth. But these wigs were not clean. They were rarely washed, perfumed with animal fat, and crawling with lice. Some wigs were reused for years. The longer they were worn, the more they attracted mites and bacteria. Her maids picked nits from the royal scalp and brushed worms from the lace. Elizabeth wouldn't allow herself to be seen without a wig. The symbol of her glory had become a nest of rot and vermin. 5. Cloaked in filth, her gowns were magnificent, embroidered with gold thread, encrusted with pearls and rubies. Some weighed over 40 pounds. But they weren't made for hygiene. Most gowns were never cleaned. Instead, attendants used lavender satchels to cover the smell. But sweat soaked into the linen. Body oils fermented. Perfumes turned sour. Fleas burrowed into the seams. These dresses acted like biological traps. Each layer a greenhouse for lice, bedbugs, and fungus. To remove a gown could take 2 hours. To wear one was to suffer. But Elizabeth endured it. Vanity was power. And power, she believed, must endure any stench. 6. Mouth full of pain. To manage the infection in her gums and rotting teeth, Elizabeth would chew cloves soaked in brandy, then stuff her mouth with cotton soaked in oils. Her cheeks bulged unnaturally. She drooled when she spoke. Courtiers pretended not to notice. Her doctors attempted treatments with crushed coral, vinegar rinses, and crude metal tools. Sometimes she fainted from the pain. Sometimes she screamed. But she never accepted full dentures. To wear them meant she'd admit her weakness. Instead, she ruled in silence, her breath sweetened by clove, her jaw aching with rot. 7. Chamber pots and the stench of power. Elizabeth's palaces didn't have plumbing. so she used ornate chamber pots, often tucked behind screens or under furniture. Servants emptied them into cesspits or tossed waste from castle windows into ditches and moats. But during busy court seasons, pots would overflow and ferment. The air in places like Whitehall or Hampton Court became toxic with human waste. The queen often walked through rooms laced with the faint odor of urine, feces, and roses. And yet, the court continued to dine, dance, and whisper beneath the chandeliers, numb to the filth around them. 8. The gloves that never came off. Elizabeth wore gloves nearly every hour of the day, not just for elegance, but to hide her discolored, cracked hands. These gloves were rarely cleaned, often soaked in perfumes, and passed from hand to hand. They became sweat rags she wore proudly. She ate with them, gestured with them, even slept in them. Some were made of dogskin, others from lamb, all soft and absorbent, soaking up the filth she carried. To remove them was to reveal what lay underneath. A monarch's hands, rotted by power, grime, and time. The Queen's hidden quarters. Elizabeth's public rooms were breathtaking, but her private chambers told a different story. Few were allowed to enter. Those who did reported damp stone walls, the scent of moldy velvet, and bedding that hadn't been changed in weeks. Candles flickered against dust-covered portraits. Under her mattress, dried herbs, old socks, and forgotten trinkets. Her bedchamber was her sanctuary, and her tomb. She feared sleep. She feared dying alone. And so she surrounded herself with clutter, rot, and shadows. Even royalty, it seems, drowns in their own sanctuaries. 10. Death by beauty. The final years of Elizabeth's life were slow and painful. Her skin cracked and bled. Her memory slipped. Her body trembled. Still, she painted her face. Still, she wore the crown. But inside her blood was a slow, lethal tide of lead, the same poison in the cosmetics she had used for 40 years. She refused doctors, refused sleep, refused to lie down, until she collapsed, dying beside a mirror, still wearing the mask of a queen. Beneath her fingers, a face that was no longer hers. The myth of Gloriana ended not in battle, but in a slow, poisonous rot from her own hand.